All right, welcome to episode 70 of the Jake Blanchard podcast. As always, we're brought to you by our two sponsors, Stream to See. They're the number one mineral-based sunscreen on the market. Check them out at stream2sea.com. Use the code JBP at checkout. Get yourself 10% off your order. And then also Fellowship brand. They make premium men's grooming products like oils, balms, butters for your beard. They also make some tattoo balm. Keep your ink looking great. Check them out at fellowshipbrand.com. Use the code JBP at checkout. My guest today, Mario Pilato. He was a strength and conditioning coach for about 8 years. He had stops along the way at Oregon State, Boise State, Georgetown, American, all universities. He also had a stop along the way with the Carolina Panthers. He's currently a medical device sales rep who works daily in the orthopedic care space and understands a wide variety of surgical intervention. He's leveraged his background in these areas to become a pretty sought-after expert in the fantasy football space, where he provides injury analysis and reporting for PFF, which is Pro Football Focus, one of the top sites on the internet for both professional and college football, specifically around fantasy sports. Mario, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jake. I'm excited to be here.
Dude, and we got a level set here. We've been friends for a long time. We've been friends for 13, 14 years now at least, which is pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah, you used to, on your business stops in DC, we'd always grab dinner together.
Yeah, we would, man. And definitely in your time in Boise as well. Before we dive in, I was like, man, when was the first time that I met Mario? I remember you were in town visiting your brother, Gino, who oddly enough, episode 2 of the podcast, and you and I got into a heated discussion about the LSU USC national championship in 2003. You might not remember that, but I do remember that as my first time meeting you.
I remember it well because we had a lot of good debates. I always love that about you.
Yeah, for sure, man. So, sparking off a friendship back there in maybe 2007, 2008 timeframe. But before we get into the PFF world, man, let's take a few minutes to learn a little bit about you and, specifically, like, you started your career of strength and conditioning. Like, what led you to that? Like, maybe childhood experiences, those types of things to get into the space.
Yeah, I mean, I played football growing up. Came in a time where I realized size-wise and talent-wise, I wasn't going to go anywhere. So I went to Oregon State. My roommate at the time actually played for Oregon State. He was a running back. As you know from me, I have a passion in working out and training. He got me involved with the strength staff there, and I started interning while I was an undergrad. I fell in love with it. I didn't know if I wanted to go to grad school and kind of chase that dream of being a strength coach because I didn't really know anybody, no one in my family, friends. I didn't know anyone in the space. So I was a little nervous. I actually took a year off, decided I don't want to be private. I was working at Nike for a little bit in their sports spark area. And then that's when I went up to Boise and moved there. I joined their grad school. I had an in with the strength coach there. I started as an intern, earned my way to a GA ship. And then from there, that's when I went to the Carolina Panthers. A guy that's well known in the industry, his nickname is House. He gave me an opportunity that I'll never forget, learned a lot of things, work ethic, just kind of how to be a professional. From that chance, I went over to Georgetown. Had a lot of experience in different sports, Olympic sports, football, everything in between. I realized I kind of wanted to go the Olympic sport route. And a guy named Sean Foster, who is actually now the head at Georgetown University, is the one that gave me an opportunity to be a full-time coach. And that's kind of went from there. I fell in love with it. And that's kind of how I got into training. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you were doing a little, if I remember right, you were doing some competition in Olympic lifting as well. Throughout this, or what was that trajectory like?
Yeah, it was very average. I got into it late. Sean Foster was the one that kind of got me to fall in love with that. I did some competitions here and there. But like any sport, that's something you got to start young. You're not going to be 25 and getting into that space and expecting to compete on a national level. But it's just something, it's kind of like what you're doing. You fall in love with it, you become addicted to it. And I love training. I actually am building a gym in my garage so I can go snatch, clean, jerk whenever I want. And I'm pretty excited about that.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly like as in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as you're kind of mentioning there, like I got into it about 6 years ago. And then about a year or two in, I realized, I should have gotten this when I was 6 years old. Like
Yeah.
the guys that are competing, like world-class competitors, definitely at least started in their teens or late teens. And it's, it's so difficult to make up that kind of ground, that kind of space, but it's super fun to do. Definitely, you put a milestone out there, compete against yourself. I think that's the biggest thing that I get out of it day to day.
Right.
Well, so then what the typical job of a strength and conditioning coach? I mean, I don't know necessarily a ton about that, but like, what do you find yourself doing as far as like athletic performance for these individuals?
So it's different when you're with college kids versus pros. I don't know your censorship on here, but
No, you can say whatever the hell you want.
the first thing I learned when I went to the NFL is you don't motherfuck these guys.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you're not trying to break an NFL guy. You're not trying to teach him something new. You're not getting him stronger. You're taking care of him. You're helping him be in the right mental and physical space. College guys, you're trying to break them. I mean, you're running them in the ground. You're really pushing them as far as you can. You're seeing if certain places, are they really a 4-star athlete? Or are you taking a 2-star, something like Boise State, 3-star, and you're developing these guys? So I actually enjoyed the college space a lot because you get to grow and you really develop an athlete. And the pros, it's just different. It's fun, but there's a lot of stress involved because there's money involved and jobs and guys get cut. They'll get cut in the middle of a workout and you can't get attached. But it's something different because coming from Boise State, I thought I knew what speed was. But you go to the NFL and you watch practice, and it's a whole different ball game.
Well, it's funny that you just said that. I was watching a video the other day of a pitcher who got traded. I think it might have been the Dodgers pitcher. I can't remember who got traded, but he got traded like right in the middle of it's either a game or practice or something like that. You're just like hanging out, and then somebody just hands you a slip and says, "Hey, you're there now, or you don't work here anymore." That's pretty odd, man.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. The professional level is cutthroat.
Dude. So then, you ended up, as you said, you found your way to Georgetown, then American University, and then obviously, I talked in the intro here. There was a career change focusing around orthopedics or surgical interventions. Maybe take me through that career move and why you made it.
Yeah, so I mean, being a strength coach is fun when you're young, but when you want to start a family, it gets a little dicey. And what a lot of people don't see is what the assistants make. It's not all that glorious. They aren't paid very much money. You grind. In that industry, you are everything. Okay, you spend more time with these athletes than any coach in that room, from making sure they're going to class to lifting to meeting, individual meetings, speed training. Working them out if they're injured during practice. I mean, you're spending 80 hours a week, training all these athletes. And if you lose, it's your fault. If you win, it's not, you had nothing to do with it. So, and it plays the same way with injuries. You can have a season where you have a ton of ACL tears, which that actually happened to me at American, and you can train the proper way and things happen, so it's kind of hard to really judge with administration of, I'm worth this. So yes, the very high end guys are making a ton of money, but there comes a point where you have a family, you have a career, you want a career, you want to be rewarded with how hard you are working. The other thing is a lot of people move on. They step up every 2 years. My wife is an attorney. So asking her to move around states all the time just really didn't work for us. We also wanted to have kids. And so I got an opportunity actually, he was my athletic trainer at Boise State. And then became my athletic trainer at American. He was there actually before I joined, and he went into working for a company called DePuy, owned by Johnson & Johnson, and he actually got me my start in the medical device industry.
Oh, cool. And so, how long have you been doing that now?
So now I'm on 6 years. Yep, and I'm with a company called Smith & Nephew, and I'm doing recon. So I'm doing knee joint replacements and hip replacements.
Okay, so take me through. Because I worked in purchasing and healthcare for a number of years, definitely around the surgical space as well, doing performance improvement and things in my career. So I think I kind of understand what a sales rep does in that space, but this is like consultative. Like you have to learn a ton about how these procedures are actually done, right?
Right. So from the outside, I kind of thought that way. I didn't actually know how involved you are. Like I said, I came for the last 2.5 years. I was doing robotics, controlling the robotic side of knee replacements. And you're really, really involved in the surgery, from helping a surgeon gap plan to the ligaments and everything from the cuts. And so if you don't know exactly what you're talking about, you can really mess someone's knee up. So these surgeons have so many different procedures and so many different implants and companies that they don't know every single little step. So you're their guidance there. You're bringing them all their instruments, you're bringing them all their implants, and you are the expert on how to use those instruments. And you really have to be a value in the room. We are not just box openers, which a lot of people joke about.
Oh, sure. Okay. And then so like, I guess it was the time that you've currently been working in surgical intervention, like did that spark the need to start maybe looking at injuries or injury analysis in fantasy football? Like help me walk across this bridge here, man.
Yeah,
I think they're tangentially related because I'm seeing this maturation, like strength and conditioning, being around athletics, passion in the sport, injuries, recovery, and then is the confluence of those two things something you've always wanted to do?
Right. So with the sports and being around athletic trainers, physical therapists, and then when I first started medical advice, I was on the sports side, dealing with sports injuries. So I've been around it a lot, but really, it was never a thought in my head. If you told me right now I could get paid for watching football and talking fantasy, I would be like, you're crazy. So, sometimes I got to pinch myself, but it all happened in DC. So when I transitioned into medical device, I love coaching. I have a passion for it. So there's a local gym there in DC that I went and coached at and trained myself. And so if you know PFF, George Shahuri, he's the one that kind of brought me in. He has his own podcast and he talks basically betting, and he's also on Chris Collinsworth podcast. Anyways, we met at that gym, and I'll never forget our first conversation, kind of like a debate you and I had. It was pretty heated, right? This was 2018. The draft was right around the corner, and the Browns were picking first. So the debate was, who do they draft, Baker Mayfield or Saquon Barkley? Me, no analytical background at that time, like, I know football, I know how to win games, I know what's right. You run the football and play defense. You talk to any analytics person, that's not how you win. So that's where that all developed, and George started kind of changing my mind. He showed me analytics and showed me, why that's not the way to go, and quarterback's value, and that's just how it started. And I think the respect between each other grew a lot because we train pretty similar. The style of training, he does a lot of CrossFit style training. I Olympic lift a lot, but it's the same of how you push yourself to this very uncomfortable level, and you were there daily training. And that's where I gained a lot of respect for him. And then we just chopped it up. So after I left DC and I moved out back to the Pacific Northwest, we kept in touch, and I would send him text messages when an injury came up, and gave a little analyst, kind of joking, kind of not. And then it kind of just went from there. And we joke off and on about it. And then going into last year, he was like, let's have a call. I want to talk seriously about you joining PFF. And that's how it started.
That's rad, man. And you've been doing fantasy football a long time. Like when did you start, like, just joking, like messing around with friends and getting into leagues and those types of things?
So Gino, Gino and our good friend John, they're both in the pot. They're both in the same league. We've been in it since our freshman year, I believe, of high school. We actually go on a yearly trip to do the draft. So I actually missed it this last weekend, but yeah, so I got in it then. I didn't take it too serious during high school. And then as I grew up, I got more and more into it. So yeah.
Do you and you guys actually like fly to Vegas and stuff to go do these drafts and go hang out, that kind of shit?
Yeah. So the way it works now is the winner gets to choose. Unfortunately, they've chosen cities not Vegas. I prefer Vegas.
Sure.
So if you guys are listening, you know where to pick next year.
Come on, John. What's going on, brother? Oh, that's awesome, man. So then I guess the next logical question there is, as an injury analyst, like, there are 32 teams? Is that how many in the NFL? 32 teams?
Yeah, 32
There's hundreds
teams
of players.
Right.
How do you keep up with all the injuries, or do you just focus on like kind of the primary fantasy players, or like what's that look like?
So I'll walk you through. Like last year obviously was new for us. We knew that the space was important, and people out there they want information. With Twitter out there, they fiend for it. So Last year I had an injury board basically, where it was kind of similar to ESPN, but I'd actually have takes on each of them, whether I thought they were going to play or not. And that came out every week, and I would update it as reports came out. And then I would have a piece after Sunday night football games to prep you Monday to start getting ready for your fantasy pickups or waiver claims. And then during the games, what I would do is I would kind of watch Twitter. I'd watch as many games as I could at once, pay attention. And an injury came up with a video I saw. I give some analysts of what I thought the injury was. I like to give some sort of take. I don't want to just be safe. I want to put myself out there and give a RTP or return to play, some advice of what I'm thinking. Of course, I'm going to be wrong. I can't be right 100% of the time. So that's how we went about it last year. I think what a struggle for me is being so public on Twitter, for example, and hearing people, they get mad if you're talking about a fantasy player, it's their favorite Dallas Cowboys player, whatever it is, So
I finally got throwing heat at you, Mario.
What's they slide it into your DMs saying you don't know what you're talking about. You're not a doctor. I've gotten, which is a compliment, I've gotten called the PFF nerd, which I don't do any analytics, so I took that as a compliment. But yeah, people are angry.
Well, what do you mean PFF nerd? So is there like somebody who's playing fantasy football has the audacity to call someone else a nerd, or are these like non-fantasy football folks? Like what's going on here, man? Because it's like, I don't know, it blew my mind. I was in a fantasy league for like 8 years. There were like 3 or 4 guys in the league that really paid attention to stuff, and they usually kind of dominated the league. They always knew what was going on. And for me, it's like I'd follow the players, I'd pick a couple guys, I'd pull some guys off of waivers. But by like week 7, if I wasn't in the hunt, I don't know, I kept my roster updated. But like, I think anybody who's playing fantasy football is a little nerdy in the first place, right?
Right. So what it comes down to, for example, last year, when the Steelers got off to a hot start, I think they started off undefeated or whatever. So George, in his podcast, said it was the worst, I forget their record, the worst undefeated team ever. And he'd caught heat from former NFL players. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a nerd looking at analytics. You don't know football. And then they went on to lose a bunch of games. So especially with the PFF, is they take analytics from like graded quarterbacks to throws in certain areas of the field and turnover worthy plays and all these different things that just watching a football game you're not going to get. And all of those takes are based off of this. And there's those people that believe analytics does not tell the whole story or does not help you win games. But again, it's a tool to use to help you make better decisions. So that's kind of where it stems from. I think, again, a lot of people will attack it if it's a negative aspect towards their team. But yeah, the betting range and the fantasy, the space, those are what are very popular for us.
Yeah. So like, maybe take me through, like, let's peel this or go deeper, just auger in deeper. Okay. So ankle sprain, questionable.
Right.
Like, what are you looking at for something like that to see if they're going to play or not? Do you have like historical data on, say, players who have gotten ankle sprains and what percentage of them play, or like high versus low? Like how deep are you breaking this stuff down?
So I'm pretty good at seeing video now and being able to tell what it is. I can see a high ankle sprain. I can low ankle sprain. I can see an MCL sprain, an ACL tear. I kind of have a good eye for it. But yeah, I've researched. I mean, a lot of stuff took time for me because, again, I'm not a doctor, and I want to make sure that I was giving good takes and quality information for my readers and PFF followers. So basically, what I started to do was, before the season started, I did a bunch of research on all the common injuries, and everything I've had are specific medical journals that have to do with NFL football players and giving information. So it's not just a guess. It's not just I saw this guy return and, so Achilles tear today, right? Lawson, the high acquisition from the Jets, he tore his Achilles today. People can say 9 to 12 months, right? Well, if you really dig into it, you look at the research, an NFL player, it's 11 months. Give or take a little bit. So I like to give, data that is supported by journals and medical research. It's just not information floating or guesses.
Yeah, and that's the thing that always kind of frustrated me when I did play fantasy, was like the questionable.
Yeah.
Like 2 guys on my roster that were questionable, and then like I would end up looking at it as like such and such had a broken leg, and you're like, how is this even questionable in the first place? Like,
Right.
so like, what advice do you give to people now? Like, what's your perspective on like, should I play him? Should I not play him? Like, how do you, like, if you don't have enough information, what do you do?
Well, first I'd say head over to pff.com, use promo code PFF20, 20% off, and you can get elite subscription. You read all my articles, I'll give you all the behind knowledge. But joking.
No, I love that. Wow, I didn't even know I was throwing a softball there, but thanks for taking the opportunity.
But no, so what you learn is certain teams do certain things. So like the Patriots, for example, they'll put everybody as questionable. So what you got to do is kind of sift through, like, what is this injury? If it's a high ankle sprain and you're saying he's going to play, well, if he's going to play, he's going to be nowhere near productive on the field, right? So there's certain injuries you can play through and certain ones you can't. You know, soft tissue ones are the ones that are hard because you don't know, is it sore or is it a strain? You can tell if it's in game, if he pulls up for a hammy, for example, and grabs the back of his leg, that's not just sore. You know, we got an issue there. But like Galladay is a prime example last year. They, start off saying his hamstring wasn't that big of a deal. Ended up being I wouldn't say grade 3, but pretty close to it. He was out for the majority of the season. He didn't tear and he didn't have to get surgery. Sorry, it wasn't a complete tear. But it was something that took him out for a while. But it's like anything else, right? They don't want to give a leverage to your opponent. So they're not going to sit there and say Monday, hey, this guy's out. He's not going to play unless it's something that's serious, like a broken bone or torn ACL. But if there's any doubt in it, they're going to put it as questionable because, again, they don't want you to prepare for the backup.
Well, and that was going to be one of my next questions as well, which was like, so teams will purposely kind of just leave it hanging until the last moment as well. So like, is there a 11th hour where information comes out and then you have to put information out there? It's like, hey, don't play such and such, like those kinds of things. Is that a meaty spot for you, or is nothing you can do at that point?
Right. So Wednesday is really the true day of when they have to report something. Usually it goes through their website, through a team website. And so that's the first designation day. And then after practice, they have to do the same thing. They got to report it for the rest of the days coming out. So questionable wise is anyone that gets any kind of treatment. So just say you had a sore, whatever, your forearm sore, and you wanted some ice, and you went in and got treatment from your AT, you're going to have to put that on the injury report. So any type of treatment that goes on, even if it's maintenance, they have to put it on. So yeah, I mean, all the way up until kickoff, they can do something. They can pull a guy, he can be doing warm-ups and doesn't feel right, and they can pull him right out. So Sunday morning is a good time to look around. We're actually working on some stuff where we're going to come out with some stuff on, the morning of and try to give some quick hitters for you. What is going to be cool this year, we're doing a little different, and can kind of launch that here in this space and tell people about it. But it's kind of a game center, like is what I would call it. So on a Sunday, you can go to pff.com. And we're going to have a main hub for everything. So instead of looking at an ESPN ticker and you just see a score and you have no idea the flow of the game, this is going to bring you everything from takes from all of our insiders, takes from me. My tweets will come up. If there's any injury thing, you'll see everything that's involved with that game. So you feel like you're watching it. And what we're trying to do from my space is we're actually creating basically an injury scrape. So I have someone working where they're going to take anything that comes off Twitter, anything involved with an injury, and it'll ping me and I'll know that there's an injury. And we'll have some other guys watching games that I can't watch. So I'll know the injury right away and I can get the information to the fans as quick as possible.
Oh, dude, that's savage. So
Yeah.
like, so this is like a whole new level. Then this is like mission control, like NASA command center shit. Like you're sitting there and you're watching your specific contribution, and then there's folks that are managing the line. Is that right? Like the Vegas or the betting lines or the in-game betting lines, or like is it all kind of mixed together then?
So kind of like if you go to pff.com, we got the fantasy side of it and we got the betting side. And the fantasy side, they have our own predictions. We have our own experts in that space. And then with betting, with George and Eric, we kind of have what we call green line. And so this will give different lines of betting lines compared to Vegas. What our programs are putting out for expectations, whether it be on point spread or total points or whatnot, and can kind of give you an edge. So you can say, okay, this is what PFF is saying, this is what Vegas is saying. Where can I take advantage of this? And so that's pretty cool. But yeah.
Well, so the NFL has had kind of an uncharacteristic last 2 years, so to speak. Going into this season, man, let's talk about it. Like I'm excited. Like to drop this on me. What's the hot thing that people are talking about right now? Like give me some info, give me some juicy details about the league and who's hurt and what people are looking at right now, because I've been out of this space for a while.
Right. I mean, you got Patrick Mahomes coming back, seeing if he can get back to the Super Bowl for a third straight year. We of course got Tom Brady, who never ages. He just gets better, which is scary. And they didn't lose anyone, so I mean they're tough to beat. Of course, we got the Aaron Rodgers saga, threatening to retire. Then he came back in his press conference. He kind of, I appreciated it. He was super honest, and kind of told her how it was. But this very well could be his last year. So kind of, I don't know if you follow closely, but him and Devontae Adams posted a picture of Jordan and the Bulls. The final chapter situation, and so everyone kind of feels like this is the last shot at it. So
it's really interesting that he's I don't know what I know from a distance, besides that I don't think he's with Danica Patrick anymore.
No, he's not.
what I know from a distance is like I don't know, he kind of mentored under Brett Favre early in his career, and now he's like posed with the same kind of situation I think that Brett was prior to going to the Vikings, right? I mean, there's
right.
Am I valued by this franchise? I was here for a long time. They treated me well for a long time, but like, am I done?
Right. So he's a little frustrated right now because he sees what the Bucks have allowed Tom to do, where he's given a lot of input on players who he wants to bring in. And Aaron feels he has the best pulse on that franchise out of anyone in that building. He's been there longer than the GM, than the coach. He does know it very, very well. And so he's frustrated about that. There's some guys that are Hall of Famers, Charles Woodson, for example, they didn't bring back when they could have. So there's some frustration there. So it'll be interesting what happens this year. I think there's a lot of young talent, a lot of young quarterbacks. Justin Herbert, he's bright spot. We got Burrow coming back from an ACL tear. We got a couple rookies who are
Joe Burrow right there, man. LSU Tiger.
Right. We got a couple rookie quarterbacks who are going to light the league on fire. Trey Lance for the 49ers. Justin Fields with the Bears. So we'll see what happens.
And then on the injury front, like what's kind of the hot topic that's on everyone's mind? I know you mentioned an Achilles injury, and I don't remember the player's name, excuse me, but like what besides that, like what else is going on the injury front?
So right now, as every year in camp, there's a lot of soft tissue injuries, but the main ones that are being talked about is Joe Burrow. Can he come back? The hard part with him is he didn't just tear his ACL. He tore a lot of things in his knee. So he might start off a little slow and have to get comfortable. He can get back, but it might take some time. And then Dak Prescott, of course, coming back from his ankle fracture. And if you've been watching Hard Knocks, he also strained his shoulder. It was a very similar injury to pitchers in MLB. They report back to spring training a little earlier than everybody, so they can kind of ramp up and get their arm ready for it. So they're not just going 0 to 100. And, so Dak kind of jumped into it, got a little aggressive, had a little strain and has been dealing with that. So it seems to be a little more serious than it first led off to be. He still looks like he's on track to go week 1, but that's another injury people are paying close attention to.
I love it, man. I was going to ask, like, how do you fit this into your life, man? You got wife and kids and the whole shebang. Like, let's talk a little bit about finding time for passion. Like, how have you built containers in your life in order to kind of fit this in?
Yeah, I mean, you make sacrifices. Thankfully, I got an amazing wife who understands the passion I have for this. Luckily, I'm going to watch football regardless if I work for PFF or not. So that kind of helps. I am pouring a little more time in at night. So basically, kids go to bed. I work hard at it. So Yeah, Sundays are a little bit more involved, and as the kids get older, it'll be a little bit easier when I'm not dealing with a 2.5-year-old and baby.
Yeah.
And they can be watching it with me. But also, I guess give a lot of thanks to Austin and George at PFF for this year. They're really trying to streamline things, so I'm not spending time just creating tables and stuff. We got some interns that are helping me with certain games, and they're trying to make it so I can just focus on the analyst part of it, which is going to be a huge help. And I'm super excited for what they got going on this year.
Yeah, so important, and we talked about it on the podcast a lot and I stole this from Bedros Koulian, which is getting into your zone of genius, right? So if like you're good at seeing the video and diagnosing, or at least providing some insight on what could be going on there, that's what you should be doing all the time.
Right,
and,
right.
and sitting down and trying to chase down a bunch of information, it's not necessarily what the value to the folks who are waiting for your comments are coming from, right? I mean, it's like you said, a kind of a time suck.
Right. So what's really cool about this year is, last year I had to wait Adam Schefter, the big names from ESPN to break news. But what Chris Collinsworth has done is brought in our own news team. So now we have our own NFL insiders. So that started a couple months ago, and it's really exciting because we have contacts inside the NFL teams, and we're getting news before I have to wait for Twitter. If I need to check on an injury or whatnot, I can ping these guys and get the proper information. Because the last thing I want to be doing is just giving up information that's not true. That's not what I'm here for. I want to give good actionable takes, something that fans can use in their fantasy and betting leagues.
Yeah, so that's another interesting thing too. Is like, I mean, you're talking about Chris Collinsworth and the group that put PFF together. Like, is the goal to be a full media company like ESPN, for instance? Is that like the one-to-one competition, or is it much more niche than that?
I mean, I don't think I can really speak to that because I don't know exactly where they're going with it. I do know he had a recent podcast episode where he brought in the founder and his, who's also involved with owning PFF, who he bought the company from, and how it started and the inception of it. And it basically started back in the day where they were using this information and selling it to teams to help them make decisions. And so they first thought of it that way. And then it soon came that there's consumers out there, right? Like the fantasy became a big thing in betting, and so it kind of just took off. We have a lot of smart people there, and it's amazing to be around them and hear the different things they say about football. And it really makes you look at it in a different aspect.
Yeah, they have a unique rating system from what my research kind of shows me. That's kind of what they're known for, right? Was going in, aggregating a bunch of data, and kind of created like a weighted average type weighting system to rank players against themselves, or the probability of winning against other teams. Or how's that work? Can you explain that at all?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different parts of it. We have a lot of math guys. So George and Eric, they both were teachers, professors in math, and they developed these algorithms, right? And there's something like called WAR, which you might be familiar with. Win above replacement. That's a lot of stuff that shows the value of a player when they're off the field. Turnover worthy plays is something that goes into different ratings. So we literally have people that watch every snap of every play of every position of every game, and that's how they're rated. So they're not just rated on plays where they're doing something. Say you're a wide receiver, the ball's thrown to you. What do you do when you're blocking? Did you do a good job? What's the rating of that? Did you miss your block? Did you run the wrong route and create an interception? Just because a quarterback throws the ball, it's not intercepted, that's a worthy play if it hits that DB in his hands. So there's just a lot to it, and what they're trying to do is give a correct rating for a player on every single down, no matter what they're doing. So those players that are playing the right way, running the right routes, doing the right things, they're going to have higher grades. So you might see something where you watch the guy and you're like, wow, he played well. Look at his PFF rating, you're like, wow, that's way off. But you're probably not watching every single play.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm going to ask you about this because you and I have had some spirited discussions in the past about Tim Tebow.
I was worried you were going to bring that up.
I bought a Tim Tebow jersey when he was playing with the Broncos just to aggravate people. who didn't like, and I don't have a dog in the fight. Like, I played for Florida. It's like my college football alliance. Like, I love Boise State. I grew up the first part of my life in Louisiana, and big fan of LSU. My dad's a big fan of LSU from, he's, grew up outside of Baton Rouge and tied into the family. So why is an LSU guy like a Florida player? I don't know. But like, I just ended up liking Tim Tebow just because it made so many other people upset. But I just recently saw I got cut from the Jags. So I don't know if you've got any, I don't know if you have any perspective on that. Is this the last we see of Tim Tebow?
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, that whole situation bothers me because he took an opportunity from someone that deserved it to try to make the team.
Yeah, so he wasn't, and I didn't watch him play at all. I never watched any tape or footage. It's just, was he just not?
He looked like he was running in mud. He was missing blocks. He didn't know what he was doing out there. I mean, again, it's a name, and so he got an opportunity. But what bothers me is I know there's a lot of guys out there undrafted that want that shot, and could turn into something. So
Yeah.
I just feel bad for the spot he took of someone. Again, that's just my take. It's not right or wrong, but yeah.
I also kind of looked at it like, the WWE does this. I think the UFC does this. Like, they can make the matches that they want to make, right?
Mhm.
That draw the attention. And you see that in other sports sometimes every now and then when players are crossing over, or maybe somebody who's coming out of retirement, or in this case, a name like him who's got good, bad, or indifferent, a really large following, whether that be politically or socially or whatever his draw is. Folks like me who are just, oh, Tebow's doing something, like, I can't wait to see what people say about it, and it kind of pulls you in. So like, I think it's a good move to get attention to the Jaguars. But to your point, like, was it really fully serious or not? Like, who knows?
Right. I mean, it shows that he had the number one selling jersey when they signed him. So, they obviously made money off of it. Again, I just think it's about opportunity. It's so hard to make the NFL team. I mean, the not for long league, that's very true. I mean, it is very hard to stay in the league, and that's just my take on it.
Who's the sleepers this year in your opinion? Who's going to have a breakout season? What are you looking at? Who are you excited about?
You know what? I mean, if we're talking quarterbacks, I think Trey Lance is going to be special this year. Of course, Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence are the trendy picks, but I think if he gets the reins, he's going to do special things in the fantasy land there. Wide receiver wise, I like Elijah Moore for the New York Jets. That guy's special. He's got a lot of talent. Running back wise, Javonte Williams, I think if he can get over Melvin Gordon, he's got special qualities to him. So I don't know much if they're about sleepers anymore. It's hard to really talk about sleepers because now people are they dive so deep into it. Like, you're not going to pull one on someone anymore. Like, for example, last year, Antonio Gibson was quote unquote a sleeper, but you get into drafts, by the time you're drafting, I mean, he's just skyrocketing up the board. So the way to look at it is ADP. You don't want to be reaching for these players. Don't reach for them.
Well, I didn't anticipate that perspective, which is like, there really aren't that many sleepers anymore. Like, we have so much data. There's been so much focus. People want to know so much about these individuals before they come in, whether it's the professional organization, whether it's the fans, or whether it's people who are putting them in their fantasy leagues. Like, we know. That's wild, man. It's like, and are you tracking injuries through college for some of these players as well? Like, are you watching people prior to they getting into the pros, or do you start your analysis when they're in the pros?
It depends who they are, So if you follow PFF, we have our college division, but a lot of teams take our annual. We have an annual draft guide that breaks down every player, and a lot of the majority of the NFL teams use that to help themselves with the draft. So a lot of the top guys, I'll look into it, look at their injury past. If they're going to have a serious fantasy impact, I look into it. But yeah, I mean, I don't have the time to look at every single, college player coming in the NFL.
So top guys, top prospects going into the draft, looking into their historical backgrounds, and then trying to make a decision, if that's going to impact them, season 1, 2, 3, NFL, those types of things.
Right. That's what you start looking at injuries in a draft. If you're indifferent between two players, right? You don't care if you get either or, and you're trying to figure out who you're going to put above there. That's when you start looking at injury. Who has an injury pass? This guy doesn't have an injury pass, and the other one does. The other guy needs to be your draft pick. if they're equal.
Is there any, I remember being a kid and Cal Ripken Jr. in baseball, he played so many consecutive games. And I'm like, arguably, that'll likely never happen again because the perspective on injuries has completely changed in sports. Is there anybody in football that just like stands out as like, this guy's going to play or is it just so variable that you never know anymore?
So, I mean, he retired recently, but Greg Olson, who I was lucky enough to coach, he prided himself on that. He played every down. It wasn't until late in his career where he started having injuries. But yeah, there are guys that, they will play through everything.
Yeah.
So there's some guys you see injury designation, you're like, oh, he's good, he'll play. Like
So
Julio Jones is a
players,
prime example.
The players do get kind of a say in that.
I mean, if you ask any player, they're going to try to play. That's what all these guys want to do. But a guy like Julio Jones, you'll see injury designations for him a lot, and he'll play. So it depends, and it depends on the team. Like if you play for the Green Bay Packers, they're known as a staff that's pretty conservative, so they'll hold guys out, as you saw with Devontae Adams last year, where he was probably ready to go, but they're going to sit him. So you got to kind of know the different medical staffs and who's aggressive, who's not. Obviously a lot of them are going to take the shot and give it a go. But if you can't injure yourself any further, I think you give it a go.
I hear you. Well, shoot, man. Like, let's catch up a little bit personally for a minute, man. You had an addition to the family. How long ago was that?
She's about to be 5 months old. Yeah.
5 months old, man. How's that been with the 2 kids?
It's been great. I mean, my son's about 2.5. He's getting like two in about 8 months now. So he's in that run around stage. We're trying to transition him to a big boy bed. So you know how that goes, having kids. He just runs into our room, wakes up the baby. So we've been dealing with that, but I can't complain too much. My wife, somehow, she's a superhero. She works from home. She's an attorney, and she takes care of the baby every single day to allow me to work and do what I love to do. So yeah, I mean, I can't thank her enough. And then our son just started school for the first time ever. So that's been nice. But as you know, now he's bringing home sickness. So everybody, actually our whole house right now is sick. So
it was the most maddening thing. It's like anytime that they start either going to like summer camps or they go back to school, they always bring home some kind of bug, some kind of thing that we all need to get over. It's kind of a pain.
Right. And with COVID going on, I'm taking him to the store. He's coughing. I'm like, no, stop coughing.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, what do you do? It used to be able to get a little sick and then not think that it was going to be COVID, but now it's like every time you get a little like a nose run or a little bit of cough, you're like, oh, do I have COVID? Like, what do I do? Like,
yeah, people are looking at you like, do you have COVID? Get away from me. So it's interesting times right now. So we'll see. But what I can say is it sounds like fans are going to be in the stadium. So that'll be exciting. Hopefully that continues.
I know it, man. Hey, well, anything exciting coming up? Anything that you want to shout out as far as the PFF world, or anything that you have going on that people should go look at? And then also give me your socials and all that stuff, and I'll put them in the description of the podcast as well.
For sure. So like I said, head over to pff.com. Tell them I sent you. Give promo code PFF20, and I'll give you 20% off. There's Elite and Edge subscription. So some of them give different things, but again, if you're into betting, you're into fantasy, it'll help you a ton. There's tons of information. Everything I've talked about are at your fingertips there, from our family analysts to our bettors, analysts to me. We'll have articles up starting after preseason is over. There's about a 2-week break. I'll be coming out with an article that looks at each team, each 32 teams, and the players to look at injury wise to get you ready for the season. My Twitter handle is PFF_Mario. Follow me on Twitter. I'll be extremely active during games and even throughout the week. If you saw earlier this morning, I will give you takes as soon as I see video or whatever, and I do respond. So feel free to reach out to me. We have tons of podcasts. The Chris Collinsworth podcast is phenomenal. George and Eric have a podcast that's amazing, talking about betting if you're into betting. We have college stuff, everything. So head over to wherever you listen to podcasts, check some of those guys out. And yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I love it, man. Hey, again, it's always a pleasure when I get to bring people who are close personal friends of mine onto the podcast to talk about the cool and interesting things that they're doing. I mean, that's one of the reasons I started this in the first place, was to explore different worlds and different perspectives and bring guests on. And I'm just so fortunate to know people like you, people like your brother. They're just such good people in my life to have around that are doing such interesting things. And you at a national level, providing injury analysis for fantasy football, like, so awesome, man. I'm proud of you. I'm excited to know you, and looking forward to following you this season.
Oh yeah, I'll never forget those days at the lake, man. Drinking beers by the campfire, arguing for no reason.
For sure, man. I'm looking forward to the next time you get over to Boise, or I can get out there, out to Oregon. So you take care, brother.
You too. Thank you, Jake.